In part 1, we untangle the rustic and scientific names of Britain's favourite wildflower, bluebell, and consider related species resident in Britain. Part 2 will examine the life history of bluebell, and Part 3 will discuss relationships between bluebells and their symbiotic fungi known as mycorrhiza. Back in 1597, John Gerard presented us with a ready-made, perplexing choice of names, the blue harebells or the English jacinth. We still have a problem today with the plant names bluebell and harebell, variously applied to different, unrelated plants. If I were forbidden to call our subject plant here bluebell, I would prefer English jacinth, which combines its geographical stronghold, Britain, with its true botanical affiliation, hyacinth. To the modern reader, Gerard referring to the blue harebells may be perplexing. For a start, bluebells are blue, but so are harebells, but they are otherwise very different. Almost 500 years since the publication of Gerard's Herbal, there is still controversy around Britain about the common name of Hyacinthoides non-scripta. Most British call Hyacinthoides non-scripta bluebell, sometimes English bluebell, which confuses visiting Americans whose Virginia bluebells, with an S, is Mertensia virginica, a relative for forget-me-not. It is said in England that the Scots call what we know today as the harebell, Campanula rotundifolia, bluebell, as on this old matchbox. But it is also said that the Scots call the so-called English bluebell wild hyacinth. Oh, I live in Scotland, and the Scots here just say bluebells. Nowadays, the name of bluebell has been more or less standardised. It used to have a plethora of local names. Here, in alphabetical order, is a selection borrowed from Geoffrey Grigson's invaluable reference book, An Englishman's Flora. Adder's flower, bell bottle, bloody man's fingers, bluebell, blue bonnets, blue bottle, blue goggles, blue gramphogregles, blue rocket, blue trumpets, bummock, that's bummack, and bamuk, crake feet, craw feet, crawtays, crossflower, crowbells, crowflower, crowfoot, crowpicker, crow's legs, crow toes, cuckoo, cuckoo flower, cuckoo's boots, cuckoo's stockings, culver keys, faux bells, goosey gander, gowk's hose, gramphogregors, gramphogregles, gramphogriggles, gramphogrigglesticks, greggles, griggles, harebell, locks and keys, pride of the wood, ringer bells, rook's flower, single gussies, snake flowers, snapgrass, and woodbells. The botanical nomenclature has also seen a complicated evolution from the first mention we have in the later 15th century, where it is called Saturion minor, until its most recent name was fixed, Hyacinthoides non-scripta. Let's explore the meanings and origins of these Latin/Greek scientific names. An extract from a 15th century herbal provides us with bluebell's first recorded botanical name. Translated, Saturion minor is a herb that we name crowleek or harebell. This herb hath leaves like unto geeks, but both longer and not fully as broad, and it hath a root shaped like an onion, and it hath a blue flower shaped as though it were a bell, and it groweth in woods and hedges. In those days plant naming was a bit arbitrary. Our bluebell, Saturion minor, was lumped in with Saturion major, the common name of which is given as standelwhelks, which had splotty leaves and red or white flowers. It was probably early purple orchid, Orchis mascula, nowhere near a relative of a bluebell. 100 years later, botanical understanding and classification had improved. The similarity of our bluebell to wild hyacinths of the Mediterranean and Middle East had been noted, and for another 150 years the name hyacinthus was adopted. By the time John Gerard wrote his famous Herbal, it was considered an English hyacinth, a much more accurate descriptor. The Swedish botanist Carl Linnaeus, who in the 18th century provided the world with the classification system we use today, kept bluebell in hyacinthus and amended its species name to non-scriptus. At this point we can detect a rather intriguing conflation of science and mythology. First, let's translate the various names. Hyacinthus comes from the name of a Spartan youth named Jacinthos or Jacinthon, Englished into Hyacinthus. The genus names Scylla and Endymion are also taken from mythology, but neither is as relevant as the more suitable story of Hyacinthus, and eventually they became superseded. You will have noticed the species name non-scriptus or non-scripta. The ending us or a is simply dependent upon gender. It means something like unwritten upon. Agraphis or agraphis means roughly the same, unwritten, but in the naming game that soon became obsolete. Nutans refers to bluebells unique among the hyacinths, nodding flowering spikes. Most tellingly, hyacinthoides means looks like, but not the same as, hyacinth, which of course is precisely so. So about Hyacinthus, the myth. Early English botanists were familiar with Latin and Greek literature, and recognizing that bluebell is a hyacinth-like plant, found the story of the Spartan prince Hyacinthus appealing. Greek mythology tells us how the beautiful young Jacinthos received a fatal head wound from a discus carelessly thrown to him by Apollo. The world's first frisbee tragedy? In his remorse, the god caused a flower, hyacinth, to grow from the pool of Jacinthos's blood. According to Ovid, to whose metamorphoses early botanists evidently referred, Apollo inscribed the lament, "Ai, ai," or alas, alas, on its petals, or perhaps on its leaves. The myths are contradictory. And there you have it. There's nothing written on the flowers or the leaves of our bluebell, so non-scripta. I think we should avoid trying to rationalise with the hyacinth what looks very like fleur-de-lis in this 13th century illustration. As with much mythology, there seems to be a pre-scientific explanation embedded in the story of an, at the time, inexplicable phenomenon. I interpret this narrative as referring to the hyacinth's annual cycle, something the early North European botanists surely recognised as applicable to bluebell. As the year progresses, the sun, the discus thrown by Apollo, rises higher and higher in the sky. Days lengthen, the temperature rises, rainfall decreases, and the plant's environment becomes increasingly hostile. Hyacinths flourish early in the year, apparently dying down as spring progresses, as if struck down by the rising summer sun. In Britain, the bluebells emerge in late winter to take advantage of the cool sunlight. As the year progresses, they flower early, then wither, drop their seed, and disappear for the summer months. Unlike the mythical hyacinthus, they are not dead. Like many plants, bluebells have a succulent bulb that enables them to survive these conditions, ready to reenact Apollo's myth come spring. Most bluebells have blue flowers, though there are occasional exceptions. A white albino form can be seen scattered within most dense bluebell populations, and there is a pink variety that shows up sporadically. The rarest is what I call grey, in which the white flowers are peppered with minute blue spots. Sometimes the blue is evident, as here, but one little group I found in woods near Knaresborough, Yorkshire, looked distinctly dull grey until examined very closely. If colour variation were not enough, further confusion is caused by the arrival of the Spanish bluebell, Hyacinthoides hispanica, introduced to the UK by Victorian gardeners. Unfortunately, we now have a rampant hybrid between our bluebell and the non-native Spanish species, known as Hyacinthoides massatiana, which looks dangerously similar to our native bluebell, so that people merrily plant it thinking they are doing good. Here we can see the intermediate appearance of the Spanish bluebell between our graceful wild bluebell, top left, and the oriental garden hyacinth, bottom right, which after many decades of intensive breeding is much more robustly built than any wild hyacinth. Here are the flowers of the three bluebells in close-up. An important feature for telling them apart is the colour of the anthers before they release their cream-coloured pollen. Spanish parent and hybrid are both considered desirable garden plants, but beware. Both are highly fertile plants that have escaped into the countryside, in many places posing a serious threat to the appearance and genetic integrity of Britain's favourite wildflower. Regrettably, many people cannot see the differences. They admire and encourage the Spanish and hybrid forms, so that both aliens have invaded the British countryside to an alarming extent. If people are willing, with a bit of coaching they may be easily distinguished and control measures considered. The charity Plantlife, www.plantlife.org.uk, takes this invasion of the British countryside by Spanish and hybrid bluebells very seriously. They provide all you need to know about the problem and how to participate in its remedy.